All right, so I'll give y'all a little bit of a 10,000-foot overview of who the coalition is, what we are, what we're about, and what we've been doing over the last few years to try to further this cause. So, who we are. My name is Sean Robbins, as Lucas said earlier. I'm the president of the coalition. Been so for about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 months now. Mr. Anthony Bourgeois, sitting right there with Darryl, as a former board member and was the original president and one of the founding members with myself and Steve Rockweiler, who's the vice president right now. And we had one other guy that was an original starting member. I won't mention his name. If you can believe it or not, his job was threatened because he was a member of this coalition. He's still behind us, but he had to choose between feeding his 2 little girls or doing this, and obviously chose to feed his 2 little girls, so I couldn't blame him for that. So right now it's myself as president, Mr. Steve Rockweiler as vice president, Mr. Lucas Ragusa for about the last year has been secretary, and our treasurer was supposed to be Derek Hugnall, but he ended up qualifying for the Elite Series late last year, and he's doing a little bit of fishing now, so we kind of let him out of his obligation and wish him well and everything. He is still a board member, which I'm going to cover on the next slide, but we are currently looking for a treasurer, and we're not asking for volunteers for that right now because we're looking to actually pay somebody with some CPA experience to do that for us, to make sure we're doing everything right, have the taxes filed right, have our nonprofit status correct, and all of that stuff. Because I don't know about Lucas, Steve, Bobby, Darryl, everybody else that's on the board, but I don't want to go to jail. So I'm not sure if they do or not. Next slide, Lucas. Oh, that's it. Sorry. All right, so the other current board members, Mr. Darryl Carpenter. Darryl's a guide down south. He's had a lot of experience with people accusing him of trespassing during his career and everything, and he didn't take it too kindly. So right now, he is probably one, and let me just back up and say this for a second. You know, I hear a lot about where's the money going? What are y'all doing with the money? Every one of these guys that has their name up here is volunteer. There's a couple of them that are retired. You can devote a little bit of time to it. Everybody else, myself, Lucas, Darryl, we all have full-time jobs. We are not taking a paycheck off of this. I am doing it because I have been kicked out on more than one occasion, and of certain locations, and on one particular occasion, I had my 10-year-old son with me. He was 10 at the time, he's not 10 anymore. And the first thing the guy said when he came up here, he dropped, or came up to me in my boat, he dropped the F-bomb. And I took that personally, and I'm not gonna let it drop until we change it, just because of that one time. So if any of y'all see Mr. Dwayne Crawford, y'all thank him. All right, so the other members, I mentioned Darryl. Bobby Tonkley is a big bass fisherman here in the area. He's come on board in the last few months. Tom Ensminger. Tom is at Lake Gunnersville with his son Wyatt right now, who's a member of the Central High School fishing team. Tom used to be coach of the team. Wyatt and his partner won the national championship last year, so he's fully invested in everything that we're trying to do here. And then Derek as well. Derek is kind of, Derek was influential in getting Gene Gilliland from BASS to come and testify in front of the committee last month, because he is, with all the other pros going to Major League Fishing and everything, he is the face of Louisiana now for BASS. So I want to thank Derek for doing that as well. All right, so our goal is simply to work with lawmakers, landowners, and all of you guys to find a solution that everybody thinks is equitable. Providing as much access as we possibly can, making sure that the landowners, I guess, worry about liability for their property is covered, and that there won't be any issues there. And then the big one is working with lawmakers. Like I said, I'm gonna give you a 10,000-foot overview. If you guys knew and had more insight of what a mess Louisiana Civil Code is these days, you'd be amazed. I'm not sure how we can do anything with the mess that is Louisiana's law. You know, and the second bullet up there is simply we're working until we have a workable water access solution in Louisiana, and we're not giving up until we get that. All right, so a little history of LASC. As I mentioned Anthony before. So in March of 2016, we had a conference call that had about 8 people on, and that ended up with 4 of us forming a coalition as president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Originally signed all the paperwork and kind of kicked it off. In the 3 short years since, we've had 2 legislative resolutions. So it kind of started off with a meeting that Jack Montesette, when he took over from Charlie Malonsaw as head of wildlife and fisheries. He called a meeting about this issue with several attorneys from the state. It was a group of about 20 or so people in the room. And that kind of got us going, and that really resulted, Truck Gisclair was one of the representatives that was in the room at that meeting. That resulted in Truck filing a resolution that became HR 178 in 2017, and that resulted in a Sea Grant study where LSU Sea Grant did a study of the problem, and they made some recommendations, which the task force that I'm going to mention in a second has heard testimony on that just at our last meeting. In addition to that, the other resolution was Senate Concurrent Resolution 99, which was a result of basically Senator Brett Allain kind of stepping on his own toes and saying some things that he probably wishes he wouldn't have said when House Bill 391 was up in committee last year. He kind of extended an olive branch after that, offering to form or write this resolution to form this task force to see if we could get all of the parties to the table, landowners, legislators, state lands office, attorney general, everybody that had a stake in the game, kind of get us all together and at least discussing potential proposals that might end up in resolutions. And then HB 391, everybody knows about that. It was kind of an accident. It was something that kind of flew under the radar for us. Representative Kevin Pearson out of Slidell filed the bill just based on a complaint of some of his constituents. And where we came in was once we found out about it, I think it was Darryl that first found out about it and was in contact with Kevin, we kind of got that social media thing going, and we were able to, I guess, muster enough support, if you will, and we got that bill out of committee. I really didn't think it was going to get out of that committee. In fact, I was writing down the names of all the legislators that voted against it. And after I wrote down the third one, before I knew it, all of the votes had been taken and it passed, and I was kind of, wait, what just happened? So, it eventually went to the House floor, and it got voted down. There were a lot of ridiculous amendments made to it. And I think that resulted in a lot of people making those amendments, basically trying to kill the bill by death of 1,000 cuts. Hearing from the public, getting so many calls that they've now gotten word to us that they're not going to be able to do that again. If they do, they're not going to be voted back in the office, and they understand that. So that's the power that social media has brought us. So what's different about Louisiana law is it's based, I'm sure a lot of you that have had, I guess it's 8th grade Louisiana. Well, it was when I was in school. It might be like 5th grade by now. But Louisiana history, everybody's heard of the Napoleonic Code, right? So Louisiana is the only state in the Union that our civil code is based on French and Spanish law. Every other state in the Union, everybody around us, everybody in the lower 48 at least, I'm not sure about Alaska and Hawaii because we haven't covered them that much. They're all based on English common law. There's a lot of background behind it, but basically the way Louisiana treats private land ownership is different than it's treated in English common law, and that kind of gives us some of the inherent problems that we have, and it's kind of why we're in the situation we are today. So some of the complicating factors, in 1849, the Swamp Lands Act was passed, and basically what that allowed was it allowed the federal government to grant swamp lands which were held by the federal government to the states. The condition was that those lands had to be unfit for cultivation. Everything else the federal government kept, and I guess they sold into private ownership or something like that after the fact. But at that time, all of that swamp land that we noticed down south of Highway 90 was given to the state. And in 1855, Act 247 allowed the state to sell that swamp land to private owners. And basically what they used it for was to fund the building of levees, whether it was on the Mississippi River or the Chafla River. So all as time goes by, oil companies are digging canals in the marsh, changing the hydrology of the marsh, really either ignoring a lot of law that was supposed to have them fill those canals back in once they were done with them, once wells stopped producing, or they just simply figured out that paying the fines was a lot cheaper than backfilling the canals, so they left them all open. All of this stuff goes on over time, and in 1987 or 88, ConocoPhillips sued the state of Mississippi because they wanted to do more exploration in Mississippi in what they deemed was water bottoms that were owned by them. So what the lawsuit, I guess it was basically surrounding was whether or not ConocoPhillips had the right to do so. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it was held that Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, owned all navigable water bottoms. Okay. A couple of years after that happened, the Louisiana legislature commissioned the Louisiana Law Institute to basically read our Napoleonic Code and figure out whether or not that ruling pertained to Louisiana or if we were different, and sure enough, they figured out we're different, right? So Act 998 was in response to the Louisiana Law Institute report that said Louisiana did not own water bottoms that weren't mapped at the time of statehood in 1812. And basically, that meant that those water bottoms were privately owned, and the state couldn't get mineral rights off them, didn't have any right to ownership, nothing. It's all private land. So everything started coming to a head in the early 2000s. There was a guy either, I think it was on the Washita River or the Red River up north, who when the river was flooded, I think he was fishing a tournament, bass fishing a tournament. He was fishing over some flooded batcher. You can imagine if you went to Spillway right now, you'd probably go to places that you could never get at the low water mark in the fall. And Swarmer accused him of trespassing, called the sheriff, they arrested him. He went to court, he fought it. Case was upheld all the way to the Louisiana Supreme Court, and I think he actually did. He was sentenced to a year in jail. I don't know if he ever did a year in jail, but that kind of set the precedent for where we are today with respect for the courts. Organization by the name of ROAR, Restore Our Water Access, was formed. One of the big guys in that was Will Courtney. Y'all may have heard that name. They took that case all the way to Louisiana Supreme Court, and the Louisiana Supreme Court basically ruled that, yeah, private landowners do have the rights to water bottoms and they can block access. So when we started this, we knew all of this had happened, and we knew the only way we could tackle it wasn't by bringing anybody to court on existing case law or anything like that, existing civil code. We had to try to attack it legislatively, so that's what we've been working on. All right, so a little bit more about what we're trying to do. So I mentioned the legislation that we had filed. We've been doing a lot of lobbying. An anonymous donor hired a lobbyist for us last year and is going to do so again this year. And that lobbyist has been working hard down at the Capitol year-round, whether in session or not, pushing this issue and trying to basically help us do the next thing that we got going on. So we have one legislator that we know of that is attempting to file a bill this year that's going to alter criminal trespass laws to make it more difficult to prove trespassing. There's a lot of details that I'm not really going to go into there, but that's one thing that we're working on. We've got Kevin Pearson is probably going to file another bill. I think, in fact, so Darryl told me that Kevin filed that earlier today. I think it's House Bill 231, you said? 231. So if anybody wants to go on the legislative or legis.la.gov website, you can look up HB 231. Make sure you're looking at HB 231 for 2019, because there's a 231 every year probably. But look and see what that bill is about. It's basically going to try to address the access issue. If any of you here have any stroke with politicians, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to get, so those couple of bills are kind of the carrot bill, you know. We're going to show you something pretty, you know, hope you vote on it. The next one's the stick. Right now, all marshland is basically classified as useless marsh, and the landowners are taxed. What's the percentage? Do you remember?
I do, but if you kind of breeze through it, I'll follow up behind you and give you a little bit more information.
All right, so that was going to come up after we go through that, but they're basically taxed nothing for that property. Okay, but at the same time, you have to remember they're selling duck leases, they're selling crab leases, they're selling shrimp leases, they're selling oyster leases, they're selling this, they're selling that, but they want it taxed as useless marshland and not commercial property. Let that sink in for a minute. So that's kind of what we're trying to do as a stick. It's an election year, so we haven't really been able to find a legislator that's willing to file that bill. All right? Landowners have a lot of money. They got one of the best lobbyists in the business, working the Capitol every day. 15, well, their main one also may just happen to be CCA's lobbyist, so think about that for a minute too. End of this year.
This year's it.
This year's it. And he's filing something. He's term limited in the House. He could decide he wants to run for the Senate. You know, we don't know. But yes, this year. All right, next one. So we were invited, Senator Al Lane, after he kind of put his foot in his mouth and got attacked on Facebook and social media, he invited us to help him write this proposal for this that basically resulted in this resolution, which got passed like 93-0. 7 members didn't vote. Okay. We have 3 people that are on it. It's myself, Lucas, and Darryl. I have presented, in fact, at the first task force meeting, which was last September, I presented basically on our behalf, saying what we were looking for, which is basically just access. I ruled out that any sportsmen were looking for ownership, any mineral rights, all of that stuff. We're okay as a group. Yeah, and I'll tell you how I personally believe. If I'm going to go over somebody's private water bottom, if the state allows them to continue to have that private water bottom, and I'm accessing that public water resource to catch the fish that are in it, if I hit a log or something that is an act of nature, I better have my own liability insurance. I need to cover myself.
Right.
Okay? If they do something to block that area, like they drive a pipe or something with the express intent, damage my lower unit or hurt me physically, and shame on them. However, if I go there willingly and an accident happens that's purely a feat of God, that's on me, that's not on them. So that's one of the things that we're telling them, is that we will help you shore up the laws to guard you or protect you from adverse liability claims. Just give us the access. Because that's one of the things that they keep saying that they're worried about, is liability, liability, liability. And I get it, because Louisiana, it's crazy with lawsuits, right? That's why our car insurance premiums are so high. But if we're willing to give that, what else is there? Okay? So basically we've had meetings every month since September, except for December and January because of the holidays. Okay, so we've had 4 or 5 meetings. The next one is on April 2nd. 2 now, all we've heard is testimony from the interested parties in the state on where they stand on the issue. So we gave our perspective, landowner's attorney gave his perspective. several people. I mentioned earlier, Derek was able to talk to Gene Gilliland, who's the Conservation Director for BASS. He came and testified at the last meeting, it was huge for us because what he primarily concentrated on was the economic impact just of BASS sponsored tournaments. And we're talking, if you got a Bassmaster Classic, you're talking $25 to $30 million in one weekend. So start thinking about everybody in this room that's not a tournament fishing, that's buying those $60,000 boats over there, and they're buying the big diesel trucks, and they're buying the diesel and the gas and the bait and the ice and everything else at these little local shops. Okay? It's $2.1 billion of revenue in this state every year. When you start mentioning that, people's legislators' eyebrows start doing this, and it's like, oh crap. If they keep saying this stuff, maybe we'll have to do something because we're already in a crappy financial situation, right? So that's basically where we are right now in terms of the task force. We've heard what the law says, what the law is silent on. There's a lot of history on how we got here with the Louisiana Civil Code, the stakeholders' positions. Next meeting, we just got the agenda for it last week, and there's going to be a proposal that is going to be presented by the Landowners Association. That's going to be the very first proposal toward a solution that we've heard. It's not going to be perfect. We're not going to jump and settle for it. It's going to be a lot of negotiation that has to go on. We might even say, nope, don't even want to consider it, right? So we still have a long ways to go with that committee. Don't expect this to be solved in the next 2 or 3 months. We're talking years, okay? The other thing that we're doing right now is everybody knows that there's elections this year. So governor's election, Senate and representatives. I think the entire House of Representatives is up for re-election. A lot of these guys are term limited, so there's a lot of new candidates. About a month ago, mainly Lucas and Darrell sent out both email questionnaires and snail mail, U.S. Post mail, to each and every candidate that we know of. And basically what we did was we're asking them 8 questions, and we're trying to get responses. We're going to turn those responses into basically a grading system like the NRA does. Give them an A+ or an F, or we're simply going to call them out on social media at some point saying, you didn't respond. If you don't want to respond, or you responded against us, we're going to light you up. Because we need everybody out there that has a Facebook or a Twitter account calling those guys secretaries, because I guarantee you if that secretary gets 20 calls a day about a specific subject, she's pissed off and she wants her boss to not have her phone ring every day because she's tired of not being able to play solitaire, right?
We were begged to quit calling last.
So you guys have to get on the phone. If you have 15 minutes of break in the morning and the afternoon, get on the phone and call. If they hang up on you, call them right back. You have to be heard. The only thing we have is numbers and votes. We don't have the money that they do. So back to that last thing, what we're going to do is we're going to, once we get all of those responses, which to my knowledge, I think we've got maybe a handful back electronically, and we've got 1 back via snail mail, which I don't really trust because the guy just checked yes, and didn't put any comments, so I think he's full of crap. But anyway, we're going to make all of that public, and we're going to let you guys make your own decisions based on that information, and then y'all can start questioning them if they're running for office in your area. All right, next one. So you guys might ask, what can you do? So consider getting involved, and that involvement might just mean what I just said. Just calling your legislators, make sure they're hearing you. Don't just call them and say, where are you on HB 231 of 2019? Tell them, look, I'm a constituent, this is where I stand on it. I am for public access, I want to know what your stance is on it. Make sure they understand that you are calling on behalf of the public, the sportsmen. We're selling membership over here. It's $20 a month. 20 bucks a year. I wish it was 20 bucks a month, man. That might get us somewhere. But it's kind of a bargain. I'll be up front with you guys. We have about $20,000 to $25,000 in the account right now. Every time we do an event like this, You know, we had to pay to have that logo created. We had banners created for the Sportsman Show year before last. You know, hiring that lobbyist, if we didn't have that donor, that's things we'd be spending money on. We're spending money on advertisements. We want to do radio commercials, those types of things. If you're talking about a radio commercial, even in off hours, like if Don Dubuque does a commercial on his Sportsman Show, if he's playing it at 2 o'clock in the morning on a repeat, it's something like $2,000 for a month, okay? So these numbers add up quick. Those landowners got a ton of money. They're paying 15 lobbyists. This is what we're trying to use to make a difference, okay? As I said before, stay engaged. Make sure you let them know. Make sure those secretaries are being hit with those calls.